Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report. We are coming to you hours before the NBA draft tonight, and it is going to be a couple hours before we figure out who the Celtics pick. Originally lined up at 16 in this draft. We know they sent out that pick to bring back Al Horford and get Kemba Walker's contract out the door to Oklahoma City. So this is the first time in over a decade that the Celtics aren't going to have a first-round pick. So there'll always be dreams. Could you get a Nikola Jokic who became the first second-round MVP? Could you get a Chris Middleton who just won the NBA championship as a second option out of the second round? It's a mixed bag in the second round. Some of these guys are never going to play in the NBA. Some might actually become high-level players, and of course it all comes down to situation. Need actually becomes a bigger deal, I think, at this point in the draft. And of course you're going to shoot for some upside here. Especially with the Celtics having most of their roster filled out, as well as having some young guys who they're still continuing to develop here. I think you want to shoot high for someone who either could develop in multiple years into something great here, through either a two-way contract, G League time, overseas stashing even, or could really just flash and give you something different here that you don't have right now. So those are the different things I came into this evaluation process looking for. And I see quite a few different guys here who I think could help the Celtics, possibly even right away, depending on what route they take over the next 2 years. Do they shred the roster apart for Bradley Beal in free agency next year? All of a sudden, this second-round pick becomes very important in that case. Or do you add a skill set that you don't necessarily have on this roster right now, to the point where a 3-and-D guy, a shot creator, just a great shooter in general, or an elite defender could suddenly be thrust into the rotation picture here? There's a lot of opportunity on the lower portion of the Celtics bench. So there are any range of outcomes that could come out here. And there's some nice skills here. Flashes, strengths among guys who, as these drafts get deeper and deeper, fall into the second round, even as first-round talents. I'm not going to look too high up the board in the second round. In fact, I don't think the Celtics are in a position to move up here in the second round, given the future capital that they've already used in terms of second-round picks to, get Evan Fournier, get that Gordon Hayward TP. They're pretty flushed on second-round picks, and I don't think you want to trade a future first-rounder to move up in the second round. What's the point of that? So I am focusing strictly right here on guys who, according to all the different boards, all the different things you look at, could be there at 45. And we're going to start with a guy named Kessler Edwards out of Pepperdine. Top on my wish list, 38 for Gavoni, 37 Vicini. KOC did not have him in his top 50, but ESPN slated him right around where the Celtics are at 44. California prospect, 6'8", 215, strong high school numbers in a very tough division out there around LA. It has defensive acumen as well as shooting. So this is a two-way player here I think could make an immediate impact on the Celtics. The shot makes me anxious. You see the way he kicks out his foot here. He shot 40% from three on 400 college attempts, shooting his leg out like this. Now, how does this bode for the new rules that the NBA is going to be hashing out here in terms of contact for offensive players, and that Kawhi Leonard rule, if he came in 2 years earlier, probably would have been really good for him in this league. The way he jets out that right leg is worrisome, but works for him. It creates great balance and rhythm on his shot here, even though it's one of the weirdest shots you'll ever see. And he was able to become a very high-level three-point shooter, 37% as a freshman, 44% from three as a sophomore, and 38% as a junior before he opted to move out of the draft here. Shoots well at the rim, 67% at the rim in the half court, and produced over 4 free throw attempts per game, or just about 4 free throw attempts per game this last season doing that. So why could he possibly fall into the second round? I think in terms of all the prospects I looked here, he has the fewest downsides, but there's a few. Creating off the dribble with that weird approach has proven to be very difficult for him. Even a one bounce shot can be shaky for him at times, it looks like. Struggles as a passer. Doesn't look like he's going to be a high-level creator. And at times can get a little jumpy on the defensive end of things and footwork. Definitely a concern for him here. I think footwork as a whole is going to be Kessler Edwards' biggest challenge. But if he can play as a third wing and prove to shoot and score in the NBA, as well as defend with those long arms, I think his wingspan's 6'11". He could get pushed around, needs to put on a little weight at just a hair over 200 pounds, possibly, to be able to defend on the interior in smaller lineups. But at 6'8", 6'11" wingspan, that's real deal. And when he gets his arms up there, he can really contest shots and prove to be a very effective wing player for the Pepperdine school that you probably weren't watching. The team you were watching this last year, Joel Ayayi. Got to get that down if I'm going to watch him with the Celtics next year. He was on that undefeated Gonzaga team who tore through everybody up until that championship game against Bailey's from France. He will absolutely be there at 45, I would imagine, for the Celtics to take a shot on. He grew up idolizing Boris Diaw. Great choice. Enrolled in Gonzaga at 17, redshirted a year, played 3 seasons after that, so he's coming out at 21 years old, a little older, maybe a little less upside in a guy like that, but he has shown the ability to improve his game over his time there. Didn't do much at all his first season, came out with a strong second season, and then playing next to Jalen Suggs on this awesome team last year, fit right in, which is the biggest thing for him for me. He can fit in on a really good team with talent around him at the wings and at the ball handling spots. And why do I like him over possibly an Austin Reaves falling to the spot? I think he projects more as a passer and a creator out of that lead guard spot off the bench, who can also score in his own right, as well as shoot. Strong, stable shooting form for this prospect here. I think he has a great array of fundamental skills that would possibly make him a potential secondary ball handler for that second unit, who might fit better with a Peyton Pritchard than an Austin Reaves would. Versatile, great cross-corner passes when he gets into the thick of the defense, has awesome reaction time, can play the pick and roll as a ball handler, and shot 40%, over just about 60% effective field goal percentage, shooting off the catch. An awesome off-the-bounce shooter. His shooting mechanics, like I said, are pretty clean here. Just smooth right through his body. And finished at a remarkable 70% at the rim in the half court this last season. Able to get to the rim in the pick and roll. Able to defend at a high level, I think. Great balance, cuts off drivers, close out good on shooters, which I think is so key in what the Celtics are looking for out of their defenders here. What's the issue? Upside. There's no real high upside here. I don't think he's a star level or even starter level player in the NBA now, but if you get a strong backup point guard at 45, I think you go with that. This is a guy who I think has a very nice array of skills here. He might not be an isolation scorer. He might not be able to shoot a ton of mid-range shots. Those aren't things the Celtics are looking for anyway out of their players. And if he can get to the free throw line a little bit here, knocks him down at a 77% rate, I think that'll round out a good enough offensive game, balance it with defensive game, where you have a two-way player here. Now, a guy who's not going to be a two-way player, Herbert Jones out of Alabama. The defensive tape for him is sensational at 22. Came up through Alabama, but has no offensive game whatsoever, really. This guy blows up plays left and right on the defensive end of the floor. Can defend at just about every single spot, has strong measurements at 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan. He is going to be the kind of Marcus Smart, blow-up plays kind of guy, block shots at the rim, defends every single position on the floor and would easily be able to play in a switching defense for the Celtics. I just love the way he goes out there and grabs the ball, stops pretty much everybody who he's guarding. He is one of the best defensive players in this entire draft and was so good that he was flat out the SEC Player of the Year last year. Solid drive, decent dribbler, but his shot is so bad, and it does fly all over the place. 35% from 3, 71% at the line. Hit flat out fewer than 43s in his 4 years total at Alabama. There's not great rhythm to that shot. There's not a great touch. Only a 50% finisher at the rim. And he was able to gamble a bit, Vicini noted, at the defensive end in college. But again, I love his tools and I love his defensive ability to be able to step into different lineups for the Celtics if they need some defense, if they need a situational guy to lock up a strong point of attack guard, a shifty guard possibly, give Marcus Smart some rest in situations where he's going to be more relied upon offensively for the Celtics this year. I think Herbert Jones out of Alabama is a guy who's going to be able to go right away for the Celtics here. Another interesting flyer, and I think the highest upside of all the different guys I'm going to talk about here, is JT Thor out of Auburn. 6'10", 7'3" length, some of the best measurements in this draft. Only 18 years old, so could he be a two-way guy, a G League initially, to develop and bring up in coming years? I think that's definitely an archetype on the Celtics team that's going to have quite a few guys on their roster spots and minutes at the wing to hash out. I think this is the mold of a guy who could become a project with amazing athleticism, quick and vertical. Some of the best length you'll see in this draft, flat out. KOC had him at 29 on his mock draft. The measurements are so great here. Finished close to 60% in the half court. His floor running in transition is much more apt to be impactful right away in terms of his early minutes in the NBA. You're going to see this guy catching alley-oops. You're going to see him cutting to the rim. Not a great shooter, not amazingly strong. He's going to have to put some weight on, and his passing can just be awe-inspiring of how bad it is. The inbound tape, when they would put him at the inbound spot at Auburn, would throw the ball out of bounds, throw it right to the other team, and really when he gets in the traffic on the offensive end, he's prone to throw it all over the place. But he is just an impactful defender. Watching this guy at 6'10", possibly at the 4, next to Robert Williams, it'd be a block party. He's forcing step backs on the three-point line. He's protecting the rim at the pick and roll spot, able to drop back, rotate, does a lot of things defensively with great instincts, and has, of course, some of the best defensive measurements that you'll see in this draft. I think at 18, this is a guy who you could play in Maine a little bit, who could step in at the wing rotations when maybe there's injuries or something, or you have a matchup that you want to play some size with here. Again, defense is what I'm looking for in this second round. There are plenty of shooters in the second round, and the fourth guy I'm going to get into here is Austin Reaves, who I don't necessarily think is going to be available at this 45 spot. I think his scoring prowess and just all-around ability after an explosive scoring season at Oklahoma in his final year is going to have him picked higher in the draft. But Grenham has reported that this guy's pretty high on Boston's board. It would be interesting to see how he's used interchangeably with Peyton Pritchard, another guy who is a spot-up shooter, catch-and-shoot guy, high-volume three-point shooter who can use the ball in his hands to create for others, as well as get to the rim and do some things with both hands inside, get to the free throw line quite a bit. That is something he was adept at doing at Oklahoma. And what I continue to love with these prospects in these drafts is the way they compare themselves to others here. Joe Ingles. When I hear that, I've obviously said Ingles is a guy who would look amazing on the Celtics. I don't think if trade talks come up this offseason, there'll be the numbers and the assets and the things required for both sides to come out of it happy. So what's the best thing you can do? Draft a guy in that mold. And Austin Reaves certainly compared himself to Ingles, and I think has a lot of interchangeability on and off the ball, to the point where he can be a knockdown three-point shooter if that's his role. Shot 50%, I think, in his first year with Wichita State before he transferred to Oklahoma. As well be a guy who can make difficult shots, get into the body at the rim. Assist. He had a 27% assist percentage in his final year at Oklahoma. So this is a versatile offensive player. There's real defensive concerns, which I don't love. I think the Celtics need some defensive pieces going forward. But ultimately, I think Reeves is a guy who might just be a little bit higher than what they're capable of getting here. I do see the appeal, though. They need playmaking. They need a little bit of scoring now that Kemba Walker's gone. This guy could be a spark plug off the bench. So Austin Reeves is certainly someone to keep an eye on. Now, could the Celtics punt on this pick? Yeah, Madar might be coming over. You have quite a number of prospects to give minutes, develop at this point. Juan Bagaran. All this French. Vincent Poirier, Gershon Yabusele, Evan Fournier's in here now. Obviously talked about Ayayi. This guy out of Guadeloupe, the island there in the Caribbean, plays around the Paris area. 18 years old, incredible burst, athleticism, a 9-foot standing reach nearly, as well as a 7-foot wingspan at 6'6". His measurables are incredible. Amazing motor in the transition game. He's already put quite a bit of muscle on his frame at 215 pounds. Gets to the rim, dominates in transition, and has a nice array of twisty moves to get to the rim. Decent three-point shot, too, at this point. 34% catch and shoot. Still early in his development. I think that's a fine number as a starting point for a shooter, and his form doesn't look terrible. Now, he can also get to the free throw line. His finishing wasn't great, 50%, so his touch is certainly something that's going to have to be worked on. But the best thing about Juan Bagaran in France, oh man, these pronunciations just kill me. I'm sorry, Juan. He's going to be a draft and stash guy. You know, you can keep him over there in France, playing in Paris, maybe moving up to the first division. He's in the second division out there in France right now. I think there's a strong case for the Celtics to draft and stash their pick here. And I think there's a strong case for me to get some pronunciation lessons with some of these guys. Now, the Celtics have certainly brought in other guys who I think are probably going to go undrafted, like Raekwon Gray. You've heard of guys like Ethan Thompson out of Oregon State, Javonte Smart out of LSU. These aren't guys who are going to be drafted. So I think you'll see some other guys come into camp for the Celtics here and possibly have a bit of an influx of G League or maybe even the draft and stash scenario that I talked about here. So I'm not expecting immediate impact out of any of the guys coming here in the second round, and so that's a reason I wouldn't necessarily reach and try to move up here. I think you take the best possible prospect, maybe a guy who can plug and play as a defender, maybe a guy who can plug and play as a shooter. Joe Wieskamp would certainly fit that profile right now as possibly the best shooter in this draft, but of course you have Aaron Nesmith in that role right now, who really got going as a three-point shooter down the stretch of the season. So I like defense, I like length, I like pushing as much of a two-way potential as possible here. Thor obviously is the most exciting in that regard as a breakout talent with awesome defensive tools here. But Kessler Edwards, I think, is the closest right away now to being able to contribute at this level, so he is at the top of my wish list. We'll see you at 7:30 here back on the Garn Report. Talk about some of these off-season team-building concerns here, but just want to give you a taste of some of the guys who would be available at 45 now. And, of course, after the Celtics pick tonight, we'll be joining you again here live on the Garn Report. I'm Bobby Manning. Happy draft day, and we will see you here later tonight.